It's Sunday school. I believe it's the last Sunday school of the month of April. And as Constance always likes me to dress like a Sunday school teacher on Sundays, behold his mighty tie. Anyway, keeping with the theme of Sunday school, uh, I don't have to keep repeating that Sunday school was a traumatic experience, an ongoing uh, traumatic experience for me in my youth. I I spent a lot of time as a young boy uh, doing chores at our local Methodist church, including ritualistic chores such as the candle lighting for the church services, the ceremonial walk down the aisle like a little cherub with my little torch and snuffer kind of thing, and lit the candles uh, on the altar. There's not much ritual in the Methodist service usually, but there was anyway, an opening and closing service where uh, before the minister walks in while everyone is singing, "Praise God from whom," and but you know that while the sermon was going on, I stripped out of my little chasuble or whatever gown the candlelighter wears, and I slipped across the street. I had to run really across the street to Tooley's drugstore. This is in Columbus, Nebraska, right across the street from Frankfurt Square, and which is a bandstand and everything. It's just right out of the 19th century. And I would buy myself a tuna fish sandwich with a bread and butter pickle, uh, which the fountain there at the drugstore. Drugstores had fountains and counters and stuff in those days. And I would spend my offering money for the tuna fish sandwich. This was my communion, okay? And then later on, I would before the early service, there was a Sunday school that I had to attend too. So I was doing all of this for the adult service, but then I had to go to Sunday school too. And my dad taught me how to the rules of craps, dice. Okay, and I brought those to Sunday school because I knew all the other kids had offering money that they were going to. And so before they had a chance to give the offering money, I said, "You want to play a game?" No one uh, knew the rules, so I could just make up the rules. Oh, you got seven. Well, you lose. But and I got busted for that. You know that story. Look what one evil little boy brought into God's house. Uh, uh, but anyway, uh, I had been what I considered was an atheist through all of this, even as a child. Uh, Once I heard what the propaganda was about heaven and hell and Jesus dying and bleeding and getting beat up and for and that I was doomed because of Adam ate an apple. No, I wasn't going for it. Anyway, so but it's Sunday school today, and I've the gods of irony have conspired to make me a duly consecrated and ordained uh, uh, clergy with apostolic succession going all the way back to St. Peter. Uh, and here I am talking on Sunday school. It's not that I don't believe in God, because I'm looking at God every morning in the mirror, and I'm looking at God in absolutely everything. So it's just not that God, okay? And so what I was going to do this morning for my Sunday school lecture is read you something. This is from the City of Dreadful Night, I believe it's from. And then I'm going to read something from my Life with the Spirits that I've shared before, but I'm in a Sunday school mood. So everyone, the poem starts off, "Oh, melancholy brothers," but I'll say, "Oh, Sunday school children, dark, dark, dark. Oh, battling in black floods without an ark. Oh, spectral wanderers of unholy night. My soul hath bled for you these sunless years, with bitter blood drops running down like tears. Oh, dark, 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 withdrawn from joy and light. My heart is sick with anguish for your bale. Your woe hath been my anguish. Yea, I quail and perish in your perishing unblessed. And I have searched the heights and depths, the scope of all our universe in desperate hope to find some solace for your wild unrest. And now, authentic word I bring, witnessed by every dead and living thing. Good tidings of great joy for you, for all. There is no God. No fiend with names divine made us and tortures us. If we must pine, it is to satiate no being's gall. It was the dark delusion of a dream, that living person conscious and supreme, whom we must curse for cursing us with life, whom we must curse because the life he gave could not be buried in the quiet grave, could not be killed by poison or by knife. This little life is all we must endure. The grave's most holy peace is ever sure. We fall asleep and never wake again. Nothing is of us but the moldering flesh, whose elements dissolve and merge afresh in earth, air, water, plants, and other men. We finish thus, and all our wretched race shall finish with its cycle and give place to other beings with their own time doom. Infinite aeons ere our kind began, infinite aeons after the last man hath joined the mammoth in earth's tomb and womb. We bow down to universal laws, which never had for man a special clause of cruelty or kindness, love or hate. If toads and vultures are obscene to sight, if tigers burn with beauty and with might, is it by favor or by wrath of fate? All substance lives and struggles evermore, through countless shapes, continually at war, by countless interactions interknit. If one is born a certain day on earth, all times and forces tended to that mirth. Not all the world could change or alter it, or hinder it. I find no hint throughout the universe of good or ill, of blessing or curse. I find alone necessity supreme. With infinite mystery, abysmal dark, unlighted ever by the faintest spark. For us the flitting shadows of a dream. Oh, brothers of sad lives, they are so brief. A few short years will bring us all relief. Can we not bear these years of laboring breath? But if you would not this poor life fulfill, lo, you're free to end it when you will, without fear of waking after death. Happy Sunday School. Now, that wasn't Crowley. The poem is A City of Dreadful Night. And you must forgive me for misremembering the poet's name, but it's a wonderful, wonderful poem, and it comes at the climax of Crowley's Rite of Saturn, and it does put people in that wonderful Saturnian mood. In my book, My Life with the Spirits, in one of the early chapters called Holy Communion, I tell about, it's sort of a coming of spiritual age story. Haven't come of spiritual age yet, so don't think it was a big epiphany. It was a minor epiphany, but it was very amusing to me. And I share it in this chapter. I graduated from high school with a grade average, and it was college prep. I went on to college. But I was a terrible, terrible student. And I'm sure they would have diagnosed me with attention deficit disorder. I was the class clown. I disrupted the class. I had detention, punishment detention. In other words, I had to stay after school every day from the 7th through the 12th grade. Which was the school record, actually. And I was expelled twice in high school. Once for I wouldn't cut my hair in 1965. That's when if your hair was too long or you didn't wear a belt or something like that. But my hair was too long and I wouldn't cut it. And because I was in a band when I was 14, I became part of a professional band, and we toured, and that's what I did. That's what I loved. I grew my hair long, but for school, I oiled it down with Brill cream, and it looked very nice. And compared to today's standards, it wasn't long hair at all if I would have worn it bushy. But I got expelled from that. And I was reinstated when my father said, "Look, he's, you know, I'm ill. I can't work anymore." And my son, you know, we need his work. Okay, we need. Uh, and so I got back in, and then I was expelled for. Uh, I was draft counseling and protesting the Vietnam War on campus, and they kicked me out for sedition. But I digress. The ACLU got me back in that time. But the reason I graduated, and I never took a book home. I never passed a test. And I disrupted the class. They didn't know what to do with me. Uh, but I could sing and I could act. And the head of the vocal music department of the entire city had exploited my perceived talents since about the sixth grade. And so I was in all the school plays and the musicals and things like that. And the music director had the power, the same kind of power of a winning football coach in our community, won awards every year, state awards and national awards. And I was sort of his, as long as I played ball, he bullied all my other teachers into giving me at least a C plus average, whether I passed the test or I always showed up. Okay, it wasn't that I was truant or anything, but I always showed up because there was an audience. Anyway, I got, as soon as I graduated from high school, I was to move to California and start attending the 60s. Supposedly I went to college, but anyway, I was singing in the adult choir at church, and I did that regularly because Mr. Larson, who I call Mr. Carlton here in the book, also directed the church choir. So he was the school choir director, and he was the church choir director. And in gratitude to him, I sang in the church choir too. In the spring of 1966, the years of my indentured service to Mr. Carlton were drawing to an end. Thanks to his powers of coercion, I knew I would graduate from high school, college prep. With the help of my brother, who had returned to California the moment he finished high school 6 years earlier, I made arrangements to move to Costa Mesa to attend college. Almost out of nostalgia, I showed up at the church for the last few choir rehearsals and the Sunday performances. The last Methodist ceremony I would ever attend was a most memorable communion service. Eschewing pagan ritual and not wishing to be confused with the Satanic Church of Rome, Methodists, like most Protestants, take communion infrequently. What is for Catholics the central and most intensely personal act of worship is to Protestants an embarrassing reminder that once upon a time, in order to be a Christian, it was necessary to regularly put one's faith where one's mouth was and swallow it. Methodists take pride in the fact they don't believe a priest is necessary to ritualistically bless and consecrate the sacred elements. They don't believe that words, Latin or otherwise, can conjure the Holy Spirit into the blessed cup. They don't believe that communion bread and wine can be magically substantiated into the flesh and blood of God. As a matter of fact, where the sacrament of communion is concerned, Protestants just don't believe. Nevertheless, like island natives who obediently to some primitive instinct still fling an occasional virgin into a volcano, they set aside a handful of Sundays a year to pass around plates piled high with tiny cubes of Wonder Bread and microscopic glasses of grape juice, and eat and drink when ordered to do so. On the last Sunday, the subject of the sermon was the lonely atheist. As I slouched half awake in the choir loft, my hormones roaring uncontrollably to the sweet memory of Saturday night's backseat embraces, something else almost as profound was rising beneath my purple choir robe. It was a realization. Suddenly I realized that I was at peace with my atheism. Ever since the Santa Claus revelation, I'd been cynically convinced of the non-existence of God of the Bible, but the severity of my early programming and my subsequent life in the church coated me with a waxy film of residual doubts. That bright morning, without any known catalyst or undue introspection, all doubts simply evaporated. Suddenly, I became deliriously comfortable with the simple fact that all of it, even atheism, was bullshit. I almost laughed out loud. It doesn't sound like much of a revelation, but at the moment it tickled me ecstatically. I never felt so liberated in my life. I looked up at the enormous circular stained glass window behind the altar and could almost hear the Hallelujah chorus. How profoundly appropriate it was that this revelation should occur in church. For this is the secret, I concluded, of all religions. There is no God. There is no God, and it really doesn't matter. I looked around at the restless and coughing congregation and smugly wallowed in the luxury of feeling sorry for these frightened sheep. I did feel a bit like a hypocrite sitting there in the choir loft, lending my unbelieving voice to a meaningless worship service. Still, I thought it was a job, and I owed it to Mr. Carlton. But then I remembered it was Communion Sunday. Oh, no, you don't. Never again. I really would be a hypocrite if I took part in that absurd act of mock cannibalism. I decided I'd sit this one out. It would be my declaration of liberation. I couldn't wait to not take communion. The sermon wound to a dreary conclusion. Can you imagine how lonely you would be if you only had yourself to look to? Dr. Petty then announced we would now commemorate the Lord's Supper. Mr. Carlton stood up and indicated to the choir to rise. The choir was to take communion first. My place was in the very middle of the tenor section. I had people on both sides of me. I couldn't remain seated. I was trapped into filing out with everybody else. Damn it, I thought. Now I'll have to stand there while everyone kneels at the communion rail. Dr. Petty will probably look at me and wait until I kneel. I might have to say something. It'll be incredibly awkward. I toyed with the idea of just marching out the side door and running to Tooley's drugstore for a tuna sandwich, but the thought of Mr. Carlton's wrath made me reconsider. I decided to go to the rail with the choir. Kneel down like everybody else, but when the time came to communicate, I'd just kneel there respectfully. My back would be turned to the congregation. No one would notice except perhaps Dr. Petty, and he wouldn't say anything until after church. It might even be an interesting conversation. Now, Mr. Carlton was more than a choir director. He was a puppet master. He conducted through a rich vocabulary of subtle body language, and his singers never took their eyes off him. Barely moving 2 fingers, he compelled us, like so many marionettes, to parade to the communion rail and line up shoulder to shoulder. He then dropped us to our knees in perfect universe with an almost imperceptible nod of his head. We knelt there in our long robes like a row of purple tents. I was very excited, or maybe a little scared. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it clicking in my throat. Now on the evening he was betrayed, as they were eating, Jesus took the bread and blessed and broke it and gave it to the disciples and said, "Take, eat, for this is my body." Everybody took and ate. I took not, I ate not. It was my first adult act of conscience. I swooned with ecstasy. I'd never felt so alive in my life. And when they had eaten, he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink of it, all you, for this is my blood of the covenant which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." Everybody took. Everybody drank. I took not. I drank not. I was almost hyperventilating. I felt I would burst. And he said of them, "I tell you, I shall not drink again of this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." It was all over in just a minute. The others downed their pathetic drop of grape juice and returned the sticky little glasses to their tight little holes. I had done it. I had freed myself from God. I was one with the likes of Thomas Paine and Bertrand Russell and Mark Twain. It was now time for the choir to return to the loft to serenade the bovine queue of believers through their snack. We looked into the dark eyes of Mr. Carlton and waited for his silent permission to rise. He gave the command by raising his chin ever so slightly while lifting his eyebrows in subtle mockery, as if he were watching angels rising to heaven. He was so cool. We kept in touch, or we got back in touch shortly before he died a few years ago, because he had read the book. Oh, well, anyway. Getting up from a kneeling position is never easy, and I was very conscious of the fact that I could inadvertently moon the congregation from this position if I wasn't careful. For a sophisticated freethinker like me, that would never do. I leaned back slightly and slid my left foot forward until it rested flat next to my right knee, which was still planted solidly on the floor. I placed both hands on my left knee and transferred my weight to that axis and tried to rise up on my left leg. Unbeknownst to me, however, was the fact that the hem of my choir robe was pinned firmly to the floor by the toe of my right shoe. I was only able to rise 2 or 3 inches before my own robe trapped me in a most humiliating kowtow. Again, I tried to rise, but only managed to reach a kind of painful stoop. My ecstasy instantly turned to panic. I couldn't even raise my head. The rest of the choir members were already on their feet. Again and again I was forced to my knees. No matter how I repositioned myself, I could not free my robe from the tent stake of my own foot. The congregation started to mumble, then giggle. I tried again. This time, when I reached the limit of my constraint, I forced myself to hop violently like a one-legged hunchback 2 or 3 times in just like tiny jerks. At the crest of each hop, I tried to lift my right foot. Each time as I landed, I belched out a pitiful little grunt. So I was up there going, This ridiculous maneuver resulted in the almost impossible act of kicking my own ass with the heel of my right foot. I was so embarrassed that I thought I would ignite. Eventually, this grotesque dance enabled me to pull myself free. But like a tightly strung bow that suddenly had its string severed, my body sprang to attention. I was upright for only a split second before my momentum hurled me off balance and backwards toward the first row of pews. All I could see was the blur of a great stained glass window as my head snapped back violently. I knew I was toppling into humiliation and possibly injury. As I plunged backwards into the abyss, the high vaulted ceiling of the church reverberated with the only words my spasming nervous system could permit my body to release. "Oh, God!" I screamed at the top of my lungs. Now, I've read that to you 1,000,000 times, I know. But I felt like Sunday school today. Until tomorrow, and a new week begins. Continue to be good to yourself, be good to each other. Hope you enjoyed the tie. I like the color of that thing. Okay. Be good to yourself, be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. There is no part of me that is not of the gods.